Hey everybody, Cecil here. So I wanted to start doing this sort of improvisation study series where I just kind of improv over a tune and then I analyze some of the phrases that I played, maybe talk about, kind of loosely like the theory behind them, and also like the origin of the idea, and maybe also how to generate similar ideas when you're improvising. I'm going to be doing this over the tune All the Things You Are, which I think is a really great tune for just practicing some new concepts over. And a lot of the phrases that we take a look at in this video are going to be with the focus of like advanced harmonic language. So the use of, ideas derived from diminished scales, augmented scales, that kind of thing. Which I think can be a really interesting sound in the context of more straight ahead tune like All the Things or most Great American Songbook tunes. So first, here's me just improvising through the tune. Just taking apart some of the phrases in there that I thought sounded kind of interesting. The first phrase that we're going to analyze is going to be from sort of the intro, where we have these two altered dominant seventh chords, D flat 7 sharp 9, flat 5, or down to C7 with the same tensions. And this is going to eventually set up F minor, which is going to be the 1 minor or the 6 minor in A flat major, which is the first key that we're in All the Things You Are. So the phrase that I play over C7, we have this idea. Right, and this is just kind of like a triad pair idea, is how most people would label this. So with triad pairs, you want to find two triads that don't share any of the same notes. And you can kind of create these cool like patternistic sorts of ideas, just kind of toggling back and forth between those triads. And you could keep the groupings kind of even if you want, like I do here. So I have a little bit of rhythmic variation with the eighth note triplets going on, but I'm still just doing 4 notes of each of those triad sets. So I have C major and G flat major, which is a tritone apart. And I play, 1, 3, 5, and 1 up the octave in both of those triads. So, right, and I land on that G flat at the top there. But you could also, do kind of uneven groupings. Like you could do 3 notes of one triad, 4 notes of the next, 3 notes of one, 4 notes of the next, like something like this. Right, that kind of creates like more of a hemiola sort of figure that could kind of create some interesting over the bar line rhythmic interplay. But most importantly, this phrase is going to come from the C half whole diminished scale. So we're going to have C, D flat, E flat, E, G flat, G, A, B flat, and then C up the octave. Right. And kind of the sound of that scale, as I see it, is like this 13 flat 9 sound, but also an available tension is going to be that flat 5 that's in there as well. And that's just kind of like a G flat major triad over C. So there's a lot of like interesting shapes in that scale that you can grab. One would be triads like we have here, but another thing that I like to do quite a bit with diminished scale is get like a triad plus kind of this weird auxiliary note. So if you have like, so this is C major in first inversion with a sharp 9 added to it, so E flat. C7, that really creates a cool tension. And the cool thing with the diminished scale, kind of you see the same thing with the triad pairs, but you can move that shape up in minor thirds, so 3 frets a piece, to get varying degrees of tension. So if I take that triad, right, I end up with all these different shapes over that C7. Like here's that C major triad with the E flat added. E flat major triad with a G flat added, G flat major triad with an A added, and finally A major triad with a C added, right? So pretty cool, interesting shapes by just taking, a really fundamental structure, which is that triad, and then adding, again, like I mentioned, an auxiliary note. Usually I'll do the sharp 9 as the auxiliary note, or maybe even the flat 9, I think has a really cool sound to it too. Kind of the same idea, taking that triad, adding flat 9 to it. The next phrase that I'd like to take a look at is happening from C7 into F minor 7. And this is still kind of within the intro, but this would be setting up the first A section of the tune. So I start by kind of playing a line that really strongly implies the sound of my target. So if on C7, I'm setting up F minor, I'm really just playing like F minor stuff over that C7, which I think can be kind of a cool way of not really going like outside of the changes, but it kind of just makes your line sound a little bit less predictable when you have, really interesting ways of like anticipating the harmony, delaying the harmony. This is like an idea that I found out from transcribing, people like Herbie Hancock, Keith Jarrett. I feel like they're really masterful with this kind of stuff where it's like, one chord is happening, but they're already thinking of the next chord, or, they're on one chord and they're thinking of the previous chord. Both of those can give you really interesting, varying degrees of tension again. But over the C7, I have this line happening. So again, that's C7 into F minor 7. I start with just this chromatic enclosure into F. Again, I'm thinking just F minor over that whole C7 section. And then I kind of have this like F melodic minor sort of idea. I'm not really thinking of it as melodic minor when I'm in the moment and playing it. I'm kind of just like, seeing that F minor shape and thinking of like, what sorts of tensions I can add to that. So, I have already that tension that's created by using that chromatic enclosure. That's just a 1, 2, flat 3, 5 melodic cell. A really common piece of language that you can move around anywhere. You can even move it around to different like scale degrees over that F minor, like off the 5th, for example. But continuing, we have then the 6th into the root as part of like a diatonic enclosure or approach. So one more time. You hear that resolution into F really strong, still again over this C bass. So then when I get to that F, I'm going to go up to the flat 3rd. Then I have this kind of extended chromatic idea that's going to set up B flat. And there I have my resolution into F minor. But I'm kind of delaying my resolution. So I start by anticipating the resolution, and then once I get to F minor, I'm like not thinking about F minor at this point. So I have this chromatic enclosure into the 9th of F minor, and then I have this idea that's sort of derived from like the A flat augmented scale. Right. And that's an idea that I use quite a bit, often in fragments. Like I'll do that as like one little cell, and then that is another cell, right? But over F minor, that A flat augmented scale is going to create some interesting tensions. Right, so A flat augmented is that A flat, B, C, E flat, E, G, A flat up the octave, right? So you can mix and match that in all sorts of different ways to create really interesting melodic shapes, I think. I used to study the augmented scale quite a bit. It's not something that I do so much of anymore, just because I'm not really hearing that sound as much, but I still have some of that stuff under my fingers. But again, the key is, I'm not just in the moment and thinking like, oh, let me toggle into this A flat augmented scale. I'm just kind of, hearing and seeing shapes on the fretboard that I know and have practiced already. So, and I'm not just thinking of, improvising within the scale. I'm thinking of connecting shapes that I know already. So our third phrase we're going to take a look at is happening on the D flat major 7. So this is going to be the 4 chord in A flat, and then we have a modulation into C major, which is a key, a major 3rd higher. So we have like A flat major, D flat major, and then that 2-5 that's going to set up the C major, our new 1, which lasts for 2 measures. So on D flat major 7, just kind of an idea that really strongly gives you the sound of A flat major, but against that D flat, it's giving me a line that highlights the 7th, 9th, 5th, 6th, and then the 7th up the octave. Some people will call that like a, A flat major add 2 cell or something like that. I kind of just see it as a shape that gives me a specific sound over this chord. But then after that, I do a chromatic enclosure into G, which is going to be the 4th degree of that D minor 7. And then I kind of toggle outside of the scale. So with this F sharp that I'm targeting here, this is a really dissonant note to play against a D minor 7 or a G7, but I'm thinking of E7. And I even add that little trill that's kind of a rhythmic variation. And then I have this chromatic activity that's going to lead me back into C major, starting with the 4th on a strong beat, resolving to the 3rd and holding that over. But that E7, I'm thinking of that as being a minor 3rd away from G7. So, over G7, you can play all of those different dominant chords. And I have a lesson video from a while back on like outside sounds, and minor 3rd subs is going to be one of them. But I feel like that E7 over G7, really creates some interesting tension. It kind of forces you to create these pathways to get you back into the one chord, because we're really used to playing G7, C major 7, but not so used to playing E7 to C major 7. So you have to create all these different resolutions and ways of getting back into that don't feel really as intuitive. For the fourth phrase, this is going to happen in our second A section, sort of. So this is going to be going from B flat 7 into E flat major 7. And I'm just, really using ideas that give me the sound of the B flat half whole diminished scale. So, so that triad sound, again, that 13 flat 9 dominant sound, this is just G major over B flat. Chromatic enclosure into the root, chromatic down to the flat 7, and that little rhythmic variation. And then I'm playing around with this, again, that's a triad plus an auxiliary note. So we have here E major in second inversion with the B flat added, so with the flat 5 added. Then a chromatic enclosure into the root, and then I do this little bebop tag at the end, which is just leaping up the octave, which is a really common phrase ending that you hear a lot. For the fifth phrase, this is going to be more of an intervallic line that I use quite a bit. This idea I've been playing for almost 10 years, I think. And this was back when I was, studying more licks and just, taking licks and trying to put them into my playing. And I remember checking out this Lage Lund instructional video that was through Jazz Heaven. And he was talking about all these cool, comping shapes that you could play over major 7 chords or something like that. And I kind of took some of those shapes and broke them up into lines that ended up being really intervallic and hip and modern sounding or whatever. But this idea I play all the time over in major 7 chord. Right, it has some cool string skipping stuff in there. A lot of seconds in it, a lot of fifth leaps and fourths as well, which I think is kind of key to that more intervallic contemporary sound. But I'm placing this first over E flat major, and then that F falls on beat 1 of the A flat major. But I'm just thinking A flat major for the whole thing. So again, I'm kind of thinking of anticipating the harmony. But coincidentally, a lot of those intervals happen to be consonant against that E flat major chord sound. So, that's just kind of a cool way that I think you can use licks, is to force that over the bar line thing. Because if you have this really long lick, you're not always going to have a moment that fits within the context of the tune where you can use it verbatim and with the exact rhythmic placement. So when you kind of mix up the rhythm and you throw it over a chord that it doesn't really work over, thinking that, okay, I'm about to be on that chord that it does work over, you get a really interesting sound. And most importantly, you can get some cool tension over chords that you, might not be the most intuitive use for whatever that lick is. The last lick that we're going to check out is a much longer phrase. So this is going to happen kind of at the right before the B section starts. So we land on this G major after having been in E flat major using this 2-5. So I land on the 7th of G major, and then I have all this more bebop oriented chromaticism happening. But then once I hit that C, I'm thinking of pivoting into an E altered sort of sound, or E7 flat 13. So that chromatic enclosure into C, and then I have, right, so this is a really, common shape that you'll hear all the time in bebop. Over a dominant chord, you have this little 5 flat 3 2 1 melodic cell off of F, right? You hear George Benson do that all the time, and I have kind of picked that up from him as kind of like a phrase ending. Right, just kind of preceding that with chromaticism from E, and then you can kind of extend it however you want. But I use that little cell to create kind of an imaginary E7, which is going to eventually set up A minor 7. But then I go down to the root, down to the flat 7th chromatically, and then I hit one of my favorite shapes, which is going to be this diminished major 7 arpeggio. Right, so over this imaginary E7, this is going to be flat 7, flat 9, 3, 13, and then flat 7 up the octave, and then the same shape. But then I use that C sharp as part of a chromatic enclosure into C, and then I'm going to be thinking of using some substitute harmony over this 2/5. So we have A minor 7, D7, G major 7, but I'm kind of loosely thinking B flat 7, A flat 7 into G major eventually, right? And I use all these different like cells and triads that belong to those keys, right? So I think a cool thing that you can do with substitutions that kind of makes it sound like you're playing more than you really are. If you're like, particularly nerdy, I think people will call this pan-diatonicism, and I think that just means that you're like using all of the notes equally or something like that. So within, B flat 7, like all notes are okay, all shapes are okay, like when I'm using this as an outside playing tool. So, all these different triads, even though I'm getting like that 4th a lot, on strong beats, it kind of gives the sound of like all this moving harmony, which I think is pretty hip. So I use that little chromatic enclosure to get into a B flat 7 sound. That's just a F minor triad there. Then on beat 1 of the A minor 7, I'm using this like C minor 7 arpeggio, which is still in that B flat 7 or E flat major key. Then I have this chromatic enclosure into F there. So that's an approach that I do a lot, like when I hit a non-scale tone on a strong beat. In this case, flat 13, my target is a half step lower. Then I continue down chromatically, and then I'm thinking of pivoting into A flat 7 at this point, right? So from that A flat 7, I use this shape a lot on dominant chords. It doesn't really make a ton of sense, but in my head, it's like a dominant phrase, right? So I will do a lot of variations on this kind of thing. Right, I'm thinking of that as being A flat 7. Sometimes I'll start on the 3rd of that. So after that, I land on the 9th of that imaginary A flat 7. I do a chromatic approach into the root, and I go up this cell that I use quite a bit. Right, and I used to, really think about that, what that was exactly, like 1, 4, 2, 5, 1. But I tried like transposing it through the key, but I really just gravitated towards using that off the root. So I'd pretty much only use it off the root. I go up to the 9th there, and then I have this shape. I use this shape just it's kind of like feels like a good, fretboard idea. Or I should say it lays well on the fretboard, so I do it a lot. Right, these kinds of shapes. Just that stretch between the first finger and the pinky can usually, you end up with some interesting lines if you're just kind of thinking about getting that shape in there physically. And then after that, I just land on the 5th of that A flat 7, and then finally resolve into the 5th of G major 7, right? So, long way of doing B flat 7, A flat 7 into G major 7. And what that is just, flat 3 dominant, flat 2 dominant, or the tritone sub of D into G major. Sometimes I'll extend that a little bit, and I'll end up with kind of like a tonic diminished sound over the one chord. So I'll go B flat 7, A flat 7, and then where I'm supposed to resolve to G major, I'll be on F sharp 7. And then maybe eventually resolve into the regular G major 7 scale sound. So I thought that would be kind of a cool idea for a video. Again, just going through some phrases that I played and talking a little bit about my thought process and like how I got those ideas into my playing. Not so much of this stuff is, verbatim ideas that I like learned from transcription or anything like that. I feel like a lot of these are just kind of, maybe I had like a specific harmonic concept or specific melodic concept in mind, and then I just wanted to create language that gave me the sound of that, So I talk about all this theory stuff, not with the goal of just getting more theory into your playing. I've mentioned this before, but the idea of getting more language that gives you the sound of the theory into your playing, so that you don't have to be like sitting there thinking a ton when you're improvising, right? You're just kind of hearing and seeing these shapes that you can connect all over the fretboard. So I might do another part of this analyzing some more of the chordal lines that I played in that solo, because those are also, like there's some harmonic content in there that I feel like I just had like a specific concept or idea in mind. I just wanted to create language that gave me that sound. So leave in the comments, any recommendations you have for other tunes that you might like to see me do this with, or other concepts that you might want to see me crack open a little bit. I'm kind of open to whatever. So